December the 1st, 2025. I criticized the mockumentary called Climate Trails on Amazon. That was very difficult to watch. It was unintentionally funny at points, but it was mostly just sad. And it's sad because there were no claims that could be tested or verified, and it was a bunch of recycled conspiracy claptrap. And it shows that Amazon has no standards. Like, they block AI slop. It's one of the things they try to do with publishing now, is if you try to mass produce content, yeah, it's going to be examined as detrimental to their marketplace, but they don't care about human slop. So my review of Climate Trails got a lot of pushback from true believers. Now, you can only be a believer in chemtrails. You're not a knower, nor an understander of the phenomenon you're misdescribing, and that's fine. That's already settled science. But what I'm offering here is the $100 chemtrail challenge. If you photograph a chemtrail and you email it to me, I will give you $100. A couple caveats though. One, I need the metadata and your location. So latitude, longitude, time of day, the direction you're facing. So all this information is going to have to be submitted along with the photo of the alleged chemtrail. And then what I will do is I will cross-reference your sighting with flight tracker websites, and then I will consult the weather in that area. And if the persistent trail is not consistent with the conditions that would result in a contrail, then you win. Like, in other words, we're looking for anomalies. We're looking for a spray, a chemical aerosol spray. And a condensation trail can only exist under certain conditions related to temperature and altitude and humidity. There's so many factors, but these factors must exist for there to be a persistent condensation trail. So if those conditions aren't where you are, and you photograph one of these trails, and it's completely not consistent with the condensation trail explanation, well, then it can only be a chemical trail. It can only be one of these, what I think are mythical emissions. But this will be this would be your chance, though, to prove that there are, in fact, chemtrails, that it's not a myth, that you're not imagining these things or mislabeling things or running with a propaganda talking point. Because, my observation on this, my opinion, is really that climate change is for the left. Anti-geoengineering / chemtrails is for the right. It's a political position because it sets you up as anti-government, because they, from the perspective of the right, refers to the government. They are spraying us. And if you go further, eventually it's probably Israel. But the point of it is the conspiracy theories positionally turn you into an anti-government activist, or at least you're a whistleblower against government crimes. In this case, chemical warfare. So now you're an eyewitness to chemical warfare. That's what you're actually saying to us. Which I want to point out, I don't have a lot of respect for people who can point out something so atrocious and not take any action. Like, if you are a chemtrail noticer and you haven't went and knocked on your neighbor's doors to tell them not to go outside, you're not a good neighbor. If you hadn't called the cops or the National Guard or poison control, then the chemtrails must have something in it that gets into your brain and makes you apathetic. Like, if I saw somebody trying to set my neighbor's house on fire, I would call the police and the fire department. And I think some of these chemtrail people would just notice it. Like, yeah, it's a fire. Like, where's your sense of, I guess, self-preservation? These chemtrail people don't care about self-preservation because they've been huffing this stuff for 30 years. and yet they haven't done anything to stop it. So I've given you a path here to prove your case. Photograph a chemtrail, give me the metadata, and if it's inconsistent with the conditions for condensation trail persistence, well, then you win $100. So that's part one, the main conversation. The second part is, yeah, to be a chemtrail believer is to be anti-government and to blame secret government for weather weapons. So you're accepting the premise that man is screwing up the climate, and that's all they want from you. The Hegelian dialectic is designed to get the left and the right in a common point of agreement in something that advances the global agenda, and that would be man is bad for the planet. Man, therefore, must be regulated by government. So you've accepted the premise by becoming a chemtrail gooner. Now, climate change people are no better, but they blame the private sector. They blame your SUV. They blame gasoline. They blame fuel consumption and our lifestyle and our big, our consumerist lifestyle is destroying the planet. But either way, whether you're left or you're right, if you're part of the dominant paradigm, you believe that man is bad for Earth. I don't believe that. I'm not a misanthrope. I believe this place was designed for us. I think this is an extension of us. I mean, I have some strange beliefs. They're not exactly religious in the conventional sense, but I think that we are in a human-centric place, and I think so for a lot of reasons. And obviously, it's not a scientific claim, but to me, that explains why the false model would try to make it seem like we're invaders. We're latecomers to the scene. We evolved as a result of some kind of an accident, but we're just a bunch of apes with big egos, and we're going to screw this place up. It would have been better had we not evolved. Like, you could make that case, that the human race is a virus infecting Gaia, and it would have been better had we never evolved to this state of technological development and intelligence. Anonymous says, challenge accepted. Okay, excellent, yeah. So photograph a chemtrail, give me the pertinent metadata, email me at timosmond007@gmail.com, and then what I will do is I will take the data, again, your location, time of day, the direction you're facing, and then, of course, the photograph of your chemtrail, and then I'm going to cross-reference that with flight tracking to see if it's a secret government drone or if it's just some regular commercial aircraft. And then I will look at the weather report in your area and at the altitude of the plane at the point where you photographed it. And if the conditions for consistent, or rather persistent, condensation trails exist, well, then it's a condensation trail and you've misdescribed it. However, if those conditions are not there, then we can name and shame the airlines. Oh, look, Delta Airline flight blah, blah, blah sprayed chemicals over my city. So to me, that's a good thing. If you can expose chemical warfare against American citizens, I will help you. And I'll give you $100. So you'll get $100 for helping to crack the case, because you'll be the first person in human history to have posted a valid picture of a chemtrail. Because it's only valid if you rule out other possibilities. It's either or. It's either a condensation trail or it's a chemtrail. Now, the science of condensation trails is well understood, and they're predictable. There are no models, there is no science that can be used to predict chemical trails. The chemtrail thing has no basis in a predictable model. So that alone actually makes the case that there's no such thing, but a lot of people don't want to go with the science. They don't want to go with the observational data. They don't want to go with a predictable phenomenon that can be modeled. No, they want to stick with what they heard on late night talk radio in 1999. So that's cool. That's totally cool. But what we're going to do here is we're going to either make the case that we're under chemical warfare and that we can actually identify the pilots involved and the airlines. And that's what you should be doing, right? Hey, look, Southwest Airlines, the Spirit Airlines is dumping poison on the playgrounds because the sprays that you see here are inconsistent with the conditions that would be necessary for a persistent condensation trail. Therefore, it's a stratospheric aerosol injection. So I look forward to getting your pictures. Sending me an email and the metadata. Let's Go says Tim will be keeping that Benjamin. I don't think anybody's going to actually do it. I would have people, I have offered the same thing with the space station. And the best I got were people would record airplanes. And I'd say, well, give me the metadata. And they wouldn't. I don't want to give away my location. What, you think I'm going to stalk you or give your docs to Big Brother? No, Big Brother's already reading your thoughts. Doesn't need your docs. Anonymous says, I was joking. It's Barney Stinson reference. My skies are always clear. I never was into the chemtrail psyop. That's too bad. Well, there are people who are into it. So look, if you're a chemtrail noticer and you want $100, take a picture. And this is also important anyway, because if you're going to make a claim, you need to make your observations. And the more observations you have, the better a claim that you can make. You can pick up on patterns. You can rule out alternatives. You could rule out contrails. And this is actually one of the reasons why we do what we do when it comes to media analysis, is that we have a body of empirical research, observations of the media ecosystem with the wider perspective, the informed perspective inclusive of media fakery and its long-term effects on worldview. We've been doing this long enough to have picked up on a lot of patterns. So when I say systemic fakery, I mean that it's built into the system. These aren't anomalies. These aren't operations that they just do on the random. No, it's actually built into the system. Let's Go says, Tim, you should have been a lawyer. You'd be rich. Well, I do have a very solid case in progress against YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, and a certain individual who has compromised one of my bank accounts. I can't access it because they blocked it because he tried to access it. But anyway, that case is solid. And it's even better now because I've actually used ChatGPT and Perplexity to improve the presentation, but also the quality of the research. My legalese is getting better. And I have no doubt that I will emerge out of this whole thing as the winner. I mean, if you consider, I don't think of it as a win-lose thing. It's like if you're in court, you're already both losers. You've already lost a lot. So it's not really about that. It's really a matter of principle, but I am going to win in those, absolutely. See, people may not know this, but there used to be this loophole in YouTube where if somebody filed a copyright strike against your video, you would automatically lose your video. And you would lose your monetization. And so this was a dirty trick that YouTubers in competition would play on one another, where they would basically shut down the competition using these means. And that was used against me multiple times. And I was like, this has got to be this can't be legal. Somebody's abusing the system. So these are called DMCA copyright takedown notices. And the misuse of such is technically an example of, I guess you would call it perjury. Because you're lying on a legal document. It's classified as perjury. So a fallacious copyright takedown claiming that you own something you don't is actually a crime. And so my point is, I was being shut down dozens of times, and many of you were here for that. And I ended up suing YouTube. And I sued them, and I sued the person who was taking my videos down. But he was unable to be located. He was, he's a hard to pin down person, and I didn't know his name at the time. So when I first sued YouTube, I sued YouTube and a John Doe defendant. And then I did this thing called when you receive one of these challenges, you can refute it, and you can request a DMCA subpoena, basically to find out the address and name, the identifying information of the person filing the false report, so you can serve them papers. And so that was what I used to get the person's name, the person behind the Gmail account. And it's very frowned upon. Free speech advocates hate the fact that you can't anonymously, but you shouldn't be able to if you're going to break a law, you kind of forfeit some of these protections, in my opinion. So I think I was in the right to use a system in a somewhat unethical way to dox somebody, but given the context, I justified it. So I got a call from YouTube's legal assistant. Somebody was working for their attorney, and they asked me to explain it to them as best I could. And I shared with them a spreadsheet of every video that was falsely taken down and the account behind it. And I said, look, they've exploited a significant loophole. And so here's the thing. I didn't know where to go to sue YouTube. I don't have a lawyer, didn't have any significant funding. I sued them in small claims court in my local jurisdiction. So obviously that's going to get thrown out. So people say, oh, you're going to lose. Well, no, I'm not losing, because watch. Because just the fact that I got their attention, I got their lawyers on the phone, they actually restored my account without it having to go to court. They banned his account, which he's still mad about. And I can show you the Wayback Machine of this particular account and how it connects to the same person. But they also changed their system. And there's some articles about this. So what they did is they added a warning system. So YouTube didn't used to have a warning where you have a strike, they give you a warning. Now, 2 weeks you can't upload, but you don't lose your monetization and you can fix your system. So we didn't have that warning before the first strike until after my lawsuit. They made the first change to their system in years. They fixed a loophole that was being exploited. But the way he exploited it was pretty much used by a lot of people as a dirty trick. Then he evolved where he uploaded some of my podcasts to a secret SoundCloud account, and then he claimed to be me, contacted YouTube's legal department, pretending to be me, and then he used those on SoundCloud as a basis for filing strikes against any of my new content. Again, he was actually claiming my voice. And I have the email that he sent to YouTube Legal claiming to be me. So this guy's committed a ton of fraud over the years. So just to get to what Les Go, he mentioned that if I was a lawyer, I'd make money. It's like, well, I don't necessarily know. I mean, I don't know how that field is right now. Is AI going to ruin it? But I am going to definitely cause this person to lose a lot of money. I mean, there's no way to really make it back. If I could go back in time, I'd rather have not had a stalker for 7 years that I have to sue multiple times, because that's a lot of wasted time and energy. And these days, I don't really give it any bandwidth. Like, I am far from triggered or mad about any of it. Like, I actually don't care. He hacked nearly a dozen of my social media accounts last month. And I just used it as an opportunity to learn how to use ChatGPT and to contact these social media companies to get my accounts turned back over. And it was quick. Like, I could actually teach you. If somebody hacks into your account, how do you get it back? It's actually quite easy. Anonymous says AI is either going to ruin everything or make it better. Yeah. I'm waiting for the point where AI, like the comedy Singularity, I'm waiting for AI to be funnier than any human comedian. And I know comedians aren't going to like this, but like, what if it happens? What if AI becomes so good that it writes things that can make you cry or that can enrage you? I mean, what if we're looking at a golden age in culture brought about by artificial intelligence? Yeah, so YouTube and I go back. I actually had a pretty good run about a year and a half ago, but the thing fell apart when I was unable to get this person served papers. But I did try something clever. He's part of another company, and I served papers through his business partner's office. And it should have gotten to him, but I don't know. It's very tricky. But there's going to be a point, and I think it's going to have to be the criminal stuff first, where he'll be pinned down. If the fraud, the felony cyber stalking and the hacking, if that catches up with him And I filed a lot of FBI reports. If that catches up to him, because I question if they can actually do anything against somebody in his position. He's in the White House press corps. He's associated with the Trump administration. He's part of that team of people who published Hunter Biden's hacked laptop. So he might be protected. I'm not sure. But if the FBI actually does do their job, and he does get pinned down for those things, he'll be paying me anyway. I mean, there are statutory damages for all these things, but the civil suit is where I'm really going to make out well, because what he admitted in these confessional emails, and if you don't know about these confessional emails, I posed as a associate of his in a fake email, and I fished. I took advantage of a situation where I saw him communicating to somebody on a live stream, and he said to his friend, "Hey, email me. We'll continue this conversation in private." So I spoofed an email, and I emailed him right away, and I got into an email exchange, and he forwarded me several emails that he sent to YouTube, and he explained what he was doing. He explained how he managed to steal my content. He explained why, which was he said he was going to get me off the internet. And he explained basically how this was driving me crazy. So you have the intentional infliction of emotional duress, you have an expression of malicious intent, and then you have a confession of criminal activity. Well, the malicious intent part, the intentionality of it, that actually matters in civil, because what that does is it means, okay, there's no way he accidentally did these things. There's no plausible deniability. He's 100% guilty on record here, so that you get triple the damages. So in my low-end estimate, based on the number of false copyright strikes and the social media hackings, my minimum estimate is a $4.5 million lawsuit after you consider the tripling. And that's at the low end. It depends on where it goes. If it's in California, it's going to be higher, but we'll see. Just don't stop. Keep the case going. Well, I was worried that statute of limitations would become a factor, but now it's not. Because the same day that Charlie Kirk got squibbed, he hacked all my accounts again. And not only that, but he vandalized them, which implies, again, malice. And I didn't draw attention to it at the time, because one of my rules here is I don't want to feed the psychopath. I don't want to feed the troll. And if he gets attention, it drives him crazy and he gets more into it. So I just ignored it. Or I didn't talk about it live, any of his vandalizings and these hackings. But yeah, he did, in fact, reinstate, I think, everything. So no, the case has just been rebooted. So I'm actually happy about it. And I got everything back very quickly. And the way I did it again was I used Perplexity. And I said, give me the information for the legal department. Lesko says statute of limitations, time clock stops once you file the case. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not actually worried about it. To me, it's just a matter of time. The only reason I haven't had him in court or in prison yet is that he travels between the UAE, New Zealand, and then sometimes he comes here to America. But he's a tremendous scumbag. I mean, really, if you think about it. But there's no doubt about it as far as, the identity of the person. Now, the collectability, because there's a lot of people that I've had to push away over the years. And a lot of them I didn't bother suing because they were broke. Like, you don't sue someone who's broke. You're never going to get paid. There was this person who I sued for stalking, and then he engaged in what you could consider, I guess, a retaliation lawsuit, which aren't really valid, and I could get it dismissed on those grounds. But anyway, I sued this individual, and he sued me back. And he sued me for $642,000. for infliction of emotional distress. And this was a stalker of mine, and he sued me because I doxed him. But anyway, I told the judge I can't afford to drive across the country to this court here, and it was COVID season anyway, so I'm like, let's just do it remotely. And their side refused. They said, no, we're not going to let you do it remotely, because they wanted me to suffer. So I wasn't able to go. So he won a default suit for $642,000. Do you think I'm going to pay that? No, in fact, I'm countersuing for malicious prosecution. If somebody sues you and they drop it because you've backed off, and then you countersue and you pile on a bunch of crap, that could be looked at as retaliation, which isn't actually valid. It's not a valid use of the court's time. It's not how the process is supposed to work. So I didn't even take it seriously. So when I saw the price on it, I was like, oh, that's funny. $642,000 for basically paying out a cry bully who basically, in my eyes, he lost. You know, he lost by admitting that his feelings were hurt, that his emotions were so bad he had to see a psychiatrist. And he spent $30,000 trying to take me down. This guy spent $30,000 trying to shut me up. That's how much he spent on his attorneys. And what came of it? Nothing. Again, it's just, you don't sue somebody who has nothing. One of the individuals I actually had sued, I wasn't able to find him though, unfortunately, was Ellen Cook, dead. Unfortunately, he died. I doxed him after he died. I was like, oh, this is who he is. And then I was looking into him like, oh, that's no good. So hopefully MG stays healthy. I know he's pushing crypto scams right now. And he's still reporting for the White House Communications Agency. But from what I understand, he's traveling right now in New Zealand. You know, I had a second stalker from New Zealand. I don't know what it is over there. But anyway, next topic. So if you just got here, I'm offering $100 for photographs of chemtrails. But you have to send me the photograph with your metadata. I need to know that you took the photo. I need to know the direction you're facing, the time of day. And that should be sufficient. The direction you're facing, time of day, and your location. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross-reference your photograph and metadata with the flight trackers and weather reports. And if the conditions at that time when you took the photo were not consistent with those required for persistent condensation trails, then you spotted an anomaly. You caught a chemtrail in the wild. And if you do that, you get $100. And the $100, you know, I'm happy to give it because you would be proving the existence of an ongoing chemical warfare campaign against all of us. So one, you're a hero. Two, I'm a hero because now we're saving lives because we're actually exposing something. Because you realize the chemtrail spotters have never come up with a methodology to separate condensation trails from chemtrails. People are just debating over the same picture. It's a contrail, it's a chemtrail, it's a contrail, it's a chemtrail. Meanwhile, you're not getting any closer to the truth. So what I've realized here is, you know what we could do is if we insert into the conversation the necessary conditions for contrails, then you could rule in or rule out that particular possibility. So simply by adding that consideration, we've solved the problem. So if we can expose it and rule out any possibility of it being a persistent condensation trail, you'll be the first person in, I think, 26 years since this got popularized, you'll be the first person to have a verifiable photo of a chemtrail. That's a big deal. DJ says, exposing something and doing something are different birds. Well, I don't have any respect for chemtrail noticers who've never done any sort of activism. You're going to say something, you're going to say that to the climate change people? Exposing something and doing something are completely different. There have been climate change activists for decades who have made tremendous impacts on all of our lives. Carbon taxes. They tax you for the air that you breathe. A Clean Air Act. I have to get my truck emissions tested because of the hole in the ozone in California. So you're going to act like activism does nothing? I think that chemtrail people are pathetic compared to climate change people. The climate change Greta's, at least they're doing something. Like, we're worried about the future. We're worried about the globe. We're all being poisoned. Let's fight the system. And you might not agree with how they do it. Laying in the streets, vandalizing art, gluing themselves to airplanes, setting themselves on fire at tennis matches. But what have you done? Nothing. You haven't even knocked on your neighbor's door and said, hey, you guys shouldn't come out today. There's chemicals in the sky. You haven't called the police. You haven't called your attorneys. You probably still fly on airplanes. Like, what is wrong with the chemtrail believers? Why can't they do anything? And they act like we can't do anything. They act like no, we've already been defeated. We're just going to sit here and die in our collective gas chamber, like our slow motion. This is basically what you're talking about. We're all just dying. It's going to take a little while, but we're all existing in this big gas chamber. It's like, hey guys, we're dying. Yeah. It's like, we're not talking about the weather here. We're talking about chemical warfare. That's why I've suggested that if it's real, it's designed to make you passive. TJ says the climate changes when you roll down the window in your car. Yeah, technically an umbrella, air conditioning, clothes. But the concept of climate change, the premise of it is that what we are doing collectively is incompatible with the long-term survivability of nature itself. And that's a problem. And the sooner you address it, the better. I think that's exaggeration. I think the predictions, the models have all suggested that that's a lot of hysteria. And I equate it to an eschatology, Noah's flood. And I often talked about this in the past, about the connection between the Noah's flood myth, because it's a myth, I think it's safe to say, and the modern day reiteration of it, where it's the wicked causing the wrath of Gaia, the wicked polluters, the capitalists, and Gaia's going to flood us if these Noahs don't, warn us and get us to change our ways. The people trying to warn us, like Greta. So Greta is like a modern day Noah. Greta's Ark. And if you look at the main organization that is warning us about the floods, it's actually called NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. And their logo is a dove over the sea. Well, what's the symbol associated with Noah? Oh, it's the dove. Because when the flood's done, a dove picks up an olive branch and takes it to Noah to let him know, hey, it's safe to go back. God finished drowning everybody who didn't listen to you. So the symbolism is very consistent. When you look at the symbolism of Noah and the flood myth, the definition of wickedness is just changed from whatever the wickedness they were engaged in then. I don't think it was pollution. But pollution is a modern iteration of sin. Like, the original sin is your carbon footprint. You're born with it. So what they've created here is a parallel myth for the atheists to be able to control them in the same way that the priesthoods control the people who are still plugged into the old myths. Very similar to how the pandemic model and the virus has given similar controls to that the priests had with the concept of the devil and sin, and the saved and the unsaved, the vaxxed and the unvaxxed. Same exact architecture here. We're talking about a template for social control by inserting myths and gods into their frame of reference. So Gaia is a god construct. Climate change is a flood myth, but we can actually prevent it. So yeah, Noah's flood. Look it up online, NOAA. You'll see the dove. So my question is, why are they blatantly appropriating Old Testament iconography symbolism and not mentioning this stuff? Why are they borrowing? Well, it's because this is actually an aspect to our modern paradigm that's pervasive. It's not just the Noah's flood. It's even space as heaven. Every aspect of our modern world is an iteration built on the traditional worldviews. It's actually very superstitious. That's why when I describe the media as religion, I mean it in the sense that the religious person doesn't use critical thinking when it comes to their myths. They just download it. Like from this book, just download it into their head. There's no real critical processing. And so they absorb a lot of myths and constructs that aren't real, but can be used to control them because they believe that they are real. Similar to delusions, you could call them reality augmentations. A better term is actually hyperstitions. And we do live in hyper-reality, which is a term by Baudrillard, and it refers to the notion of a society that can no longer bothers to discern between real and fake. And any cult fits that definition. If you're in a cult, you've accepted certain things that don't exist. Yeah, you're living in a hyper-reality, an augmented reality. But what they've done, I believe it's actually syncretism. The merging of the Old Testament with modern science, the merging the old myths with a modern scientific explanation in all these areas, yeah, that's a syncretic blend of the old and the new. So if you look at the traditional worldview, merge it with science and science fiction, you can kind of see our new space-age religion for what it is. Nasatology. Aliens are, in fact, angels for the atheists. Think about it. You can be an atheist and still believe in angels. They just rebrand it under the context of science. And I found some writings by these Russian rocket pioneers, these rocket scientists, pre-NASA, who were into something called cosmism and panpsychism, where they were starting to define outer space as a new heaven. And they even spoke of taking older religious concepts and putting them into a scientific context. But cosmism, panpsychism, these are all ways of describing the universe as essentially our collective future in a paradise where we are communing with the intelligent universe, where we're merging as a species, like we're transcending. And that's kind of what Scientology is about. When Elon Musk said at that event in San Antonio, South by Southwest, he said that his vision was for humanity to become a multiplanetary species, and that we needed to become a multiplanetary species if we were to survive. Well, that's a direct quote from this Russian rocket scientist named Konstantin, who's a very interesting figure in all of this stuff. Dark Ghost Wind says, I feel like it's a weird perversion of the Bible. A lot of what truthers claim is happening is twisted. Ephesians 6:11 is one. Yeah, the writers of these scripts appropriate from many different sources, and the Bible's one of them. But it's not that they're perverting the Bible. It's that they're consolidating power. And so they want to bring in Bible believers, atheists, and Quran believers, Scientologists. Everybody's going to fit. Everybody already fits. Everybody fits into this one world paradigm. It's already succeeded. That's the main thing here. The one world religion scenario as a thing that's going to happen that we have to resist, sorry, it's a little late. It already happened. And you're not resisting it. If you haven't identified it and separated from it, you're part of it. That's one of the reasons why I push back against all these orthodox issues, these orthodox trutherisms, like anti-vax and anti-geoengineering. It's like, just by taking a position in these things, you're joining the state cult. DJ says 2 things were created explicitly for control: government and religion. I would add, maybe not created for it, but it's been co-opted for it. I would add entertainment. Government, religion, entertainment. It's all one. In fact, I would even say that religion, entertainment are just subsets of government. Wings of government. Entertainment as a wing of government. And that's one of the big reveals that the IPS think tank has done more to reveal than anyone, because people will notice certain things and dismiss the significance of it. But what we have done by focusing on concurrent and predictive and reinforcement programming with regard to PSYOPs is that all of the mainstream entertainment serves the PSYOP entertainment complex, is what I call it. They serve the PSYOPs as like reinforcement content, predictive content, product placement for future events, conditioning the masses, setting us up to be suggestible, so the event, when it's faked, seems inevitable. So the manufacturing of our worldview and history, which is an ongoing process, is aided and abetted by entertainment. And we can name directors who are all part of this. I had this conversation yesterday with somebody who was trying to tell me that the reason why they put stuff in movies is because if you watch stuff in the movies, it will manifest in real life. And I'm like, you realize these events are all fake. The events that are predicted, that we're conditioned for, that we're being sold on in advance, are fake. So no, it's not magic, no simulation. We've figured out what's going on. It's propaganda. No need to insert any mystical explanations. And I blocked that person because we're no longer entertaining other than to study them. But we're not entertaining people who are still stuck on the old operating system. What's the point? They're not going to drag us back into their dark age. They're not going to drag us back into a failed model. Like, we've moved on. Alt media is part of the same infrastructure as mainstream media. They're in the same closed informational system. Like, we've moved on. So if you're still confused about predictive programming, or you think it's merely coincidence, that's fine. But, you don't have the same point of view we do. And we're not trying to convert you. You stay with your state religion. And this goes for all of the conspiracy red pill issues. Like, if you think Charlie Kirk is dead, we're actually not in the same universe. Yours is augmented. Your internalized model of the world contains provable lies and hyperstitions and God constructs and hoaxes. Which explains why your opinions are very different from our own. I mean, that's one of the points here when it comes to point of view, is that if your opinions are coming solely based on whatever you get from the main and alternative media universes, the output you get is going to be very limited. So you might think you're open-minded because you have 30 different theories as to who killed Charlie Kirk. But if you haven't considered the possibility that he's not dead, you're actually not open-minded, because you chose from the menu they gave you. So any point of view that you have, alternative or mainstream, is going to be constrained by the guardrails they planted there. And so what we have done is we have stepped outside of those guardrails. So the off-world stage perspective is qualitatively different. We have we have additional facts. So it's not just differences of opinion. These aren't equally valid opinions. We don't need to say, well, this person believes that aliens are inspiring directors with prophetic visions. Like, yeah, you can believe that, but we're not going to consider that to be valid. You can believe in chemtrails, but that's a superstition, so that's not going to be treated here as valid. We have standards. There are no standards on the world stage. It's practically schizoid, solipsistic. WWE just had a wrestler injure his shoulder leading up to Saturday's Survivor Series event. In one of the matches Saturday, a wrestler looms like he injures himself in the same way, but he fakes it. They used the injury to prime the crowd for the faked injury, or maybe the initial injury was fake too. Just thought it was ironic. to see them using predictive programming like that. Well, we live in a kayfabe reality. You know, if your standard of evidence is it looks real, bro, that's not good enough. There were people who were saying that I was crazy for saying that Raja Jackson was fake punching Psycho Stu, which I stand by that. That was totally fake. But people were saying, oh, it looks so real. Well, look, every single wrestling move looks real. Every fake punch looks real. Looks real's not good enough. And then if you're going to stick with that one anyway, the newspapers reported that Jackson punched Psycho Stu, who was unconscious, 23 times in the face, and teeth and blood flew everywhere. The video doesn't support that. And at best, 11 punches connected. But it looked like he was fluffing the beard. It didn't look like even real punches. But the magic trick here was, so if you don't know the story, Psycho Stu gets body slammed and then he's unconscious. Well, if you didn't know, people don't get knocked out from World Wrestling Entertainment style body slams, where they're flopping on the ground, the force is distributed across their entire backs. Like, that doesn't knock you out when you're slammed on the canvas. It doesn't even knock the wind out of you. They fake it on occasion for drama, but that's not something that actually knocks people out. I looked into the medical literature on it. I couldn't find any medical literature on people getting knocked out from World Wrestling Entertainment style body slams. So I already kind of ruled that out. So Psycho Stu is pretending to be unconscious. He's throwing his face back and forth as fast as he can. And then Jackson is throwing these fake hooked punches that go over his face, and it looks like he's punching him. So it looks real to some people. It didn't look real when I slowed it down so I could actually count the punches. But if it was real, why did the newspapers report 23 punches? Why did they exaggerate blood and teeth when none of that was there? Dark Ghost Wind says, do people even remember the Raja Jackson incident? If you ask these people who are so vocal about these events a month later, they look at you like you're crazy. Yeah, isn't that funny? The ones who were supercharged about it, who were threatening to come, there were people who were threatening to come to my house. Because I was on Sean Strickland's Twitter account, and I called it fake. And I posted my video, I slowed it down. I did a punch count, and less than half of them even connected. A lot of them missed. And I said, how do you miss an unconscious person that you're sitting on? And they said, oh, he was so emotional that he was missing. Like, they make excuses. It's kind of hilarious. It's like talking to children defending wrestling is real. But a lot of them were so mad about it. Some of them threatened to come down to my house and punch me in the face 23 times. Like, I got all kinds of threats. And like, it's like, just make sure you punch me the way Raja Jackson did so it doesn't actually hurt. Now, none of them came down and pile drive me or anything. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized this story is just full of it, because you don't get knocked out from that. That was a consensual body slam. It wasn't like he got picked up unaware and was thrown to the ground. No, it was purely consensual. He put his hand on Raja's hip, the other hand on the shoulder. It's like square dancing. It's like these are practiced, rehearsed moves. It's choreographed. So it's a choreographed, 100% volitional, consensual body slam, and it's done like ballet, essentially. And he gets thrown to the ground, and he pretends to be knocked out. And he doesn't wake up for like 24 hours. I mean, give me a break. Yeah, Anonymous, imagine getting mad for being told wrestling is fake in 2025. Well, this really struck me, because so many of these people who are mad at me are always calling news fake. And they're like, yeah, wrestling's fake, but that was real. Why was that real? Because they said it was real? And that showed me how it's so easy to fool people. Like, people are so gullible if they're emotionally attached to it. So I think the emotions are what got them. Because this is where I knew it was a psyop. So this is the other side of it. It got tied into, someone mentioned here, rage bait, outrage bait. That was part of it. Because this was following Austin Metcalf, and then Shiloh Hendricks. You had these racial psyops going on. So the fact that it was a black fighter and a white unconscious wrestler getting beaten, it got racialized quick, where all of a sudden All kinds of people were making claims like because Raja Jackson's race, he lost control. Like they were getting very racist about it. And I was like, okay, this has got to be some kind of outrage bait. And then I saw who promoted it with that racial lens. And it was all the woke right types and all the MMA types. And I'm like, okay, this is obviously an op. And then this was followed by the white girl in the subway getting stabbed by the black guy in the hoodie. And then that was framed as a racial attack. This is our George Floyd moment. Yeah, exactly. Dewitt's Les says many experts refuse to play it in slow motion. Yeah, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't look at it critically because I was right. And then I looked even deeper into it. So Raja Jackson's father, Rampage Jackson, he got his nickname Rampage Jackson because he body slammed somebody in an MMA fight. The guy got knocked out and he continued to punch him. Sound familiar? They recycled the story from the father. But I looked at the father's video, and his father was a real fighter, MMA. It wasn't like wrestling stuff. And the body slam was not a WWE style body slam. The guy was mostly still up in the air and only his head hit the ground first. It was obviously a really bad hit. But I thought it was notable how if something's designated real, they will believe it. Now, their basis for believing it was solely on the premise that it looked real. That was my point. Because it looked real. And I said, yeah, because it looks real is not enough. Let's go deeper. And the more I looked at this story, the less likely it seemed that it was real. One of our hoax indicators is if the event is immediately promoted with political agendas by all the usual influencers along political lines. Like if it's a right-wing psyop or a left-wing psyop, it gives itself away very quickly. And the fact that this one turned into a race thing instantly was a huge red flag. Anonymous says, that was in Pride FC, which did have fixed fights, so even that Rampage fight could have been faked. Yeah, I haven't ruled that out. I will just say that that one looked realer. But I have no reason to think any of it is... I mean, look, again, looking real is not enough. And maybe it's some kind of a litmus test or conditioning. Like a lot of these events give the programmers a great deal of insight into how gullible we are en masse. And as long as the masses are gullible, it doesn't matter. Like those of us who see through it, we don't really affect them. We're too marginal. We're too small. Like oh, we better sharpen our game because the auto hoaxers are watching. Like they don't care. If anything, they find our assessments useful because we're exposing the holes and the flaws in their system. Like I hope they take my advice and come up with tear squibs, little flesh-colored packets that you put below your eyes, and when you press it with Kleenex, it squirts water out. Like little, they don't have to be like forceful squibs with like a pump, like what they use for Charlie Kirk's gushing neck wound, but more like you push it and it just, like a sponge almost, and it squeezes out the water, and a limited amount. You know, we don't want it gushing all over the stage. We should invent it. Like a line of squibs. We could be suppliers for the PSYOP entertainment complex. We could supply talent. We could, I actually started this as a joke. I started a crisis actor company. And I was recruiting actors through an ad that I placed. And I set the site up, I put up ads, and I did this to prove a point to our Discord server. I said, watch. Because there were people say, well, how do they get people to take part in these things? It's like, what do you mean? The jails are full of criminals. So many people are willing to lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, and most of them aren't in jail. It's not hard to find liars and manipulators and people who will do propaganda, who will sell out every other person for personal gain. Like, they're everywhere. This world's evil. So I did put an ad on Craigslist for crisis actors, and I basically said, actors willing to fake cry on TV, you must be comfortable with lying and signing a non-disclosure agreement. And I had so many people responding that I shut off the ad. And I was only offering $50. So right now, you may not know this. Like somebody once said to me, some arachnophobe, they told me, wherever you are, there's always a spider within 9 feet of you. I was like, what? Like, I'm looking around the room. Well, wherever you are, within a 5-mile radius, there's at least 24 lying sellouts willing to produce atrocity propaganda to psychologically terrorize you into compliance. And they'll do it for $50. Yeah, let's go. Why would they lie? And, you know, I'm not knocking people for their naivety, because good people don't think like bad people. Good people don't know how psychopaths think. They don't know how criminals think. And they project their goodness onto everybody else. So you can't think that way. I wouldn't do that. Doesn't mean that person wouldn't. And then you also have to consider the fact that we're dealing with intelligence agencies. Spycraft is not new. PsyOps aren't even new. Propaganda is super sophisticated, and it's merged with our mass entertainment at a level that, to me, it's scandalous. This is the only conspiracy worth talking about. The fact that all of our entertainment propaganda has been specifically hijacked for the purposes of reinforcing fake staged news events. And this doesn't get any kind of airtime. Conspiracy theorists don't talk about it because they're not allowed to, or they don't know. And if they did know, they probably wouldn't be allowed to, because what it reveals is that the major transformative events of our lives, the major psychological operations, these historical events, these significant events, are planned in advance by so many years that it would reframe how people view media itself. It would reveal the whole game. And so it's never going to be talked about by big channels. You will never hear any of them talk. They talk about safe stuff. Like right now, Joe Rogan is in the news. He's got this guy, I think his name is Jesse Michaels, or I think it's Jesse Michaels. They're talking conspiracies for hours. Joe Rogan is 100% NASA's lying about the moon landings. And it's beyond just Apollo 11. He's comparing the footage of Apollo 15 to Apollo 11. He's recognizing some of the footage is obviously slowed down. So Joe Rogan is a full-blown moon landing denialist. And he's talking about aliens, and he says Musk knows about aliens but can't talk. So he acts like he's fringe, but you have to be able to recognize fake fringe. Fake free thinkers. They're still in the closed system, so they're fake open-minded conversations, because they will talk about the moon landing being fake because that happened so long ago that nobody cares. And the guilty parties are all dead, or mostly. That's safe to talk about. But they will never talk about, oh, the Chinese space station is fake. It looks like the ISS, but they ordered it from Temu. And the graphics are even worse. Like, no, they'll never talk about the fake space station. So they're not open-minded. They'll never talk about SpaceX being fake or Blue Origin being fake. Kate Perry didn't go to space. No, they won't touch that. They're fake. So Joe Rogan talking about the moon landing not being real isn't groundbreaking or even noteworthy. It's an old canard. It's an old guardrail. And it's actually sort of you could call it a limited hangout. So the way a limited hangout works is you have a big secret. NASA's fake. Now, some people are going to notice, so you release an acceptable amount of information that you consider to be like an acceptable loss. So let's give them this. And then all the people looking into that are validated. Hey, we were right about NASA. Look, they're lying. Here's our evidence. But what they're given is a mix of good and bad information, and it's not conclusive. And it boils down to incredulity and opinion. Meanwhile, now they know everybody who's in the know and how much they know, and they control the leak. Yeah, exactly. Auto Hoaxology 33, quote, moon landings are fake, but there's a secret space program. Right. Yeah, that's fake, but like Alex Jones, and I think he makes stuff up on the spot. He's like, well, they had to fake the moon landing because the Van Allen radiation belt ruined the film. So they, at the same time they were on the moon, they filmed a fake one here on Earth. And they gave us that footage, but it was just like what happened up there. But they actually got up there with secret stuff I can't talk about. Okay. So the real mission was flying saucers to the moon, but the Van Allen radiation belt destroyed the footage. So what we got was real, but it faked it with a rocket, but it was done here on Earth. I mean, I don't know. If you've seen the movie Fly Me to the Moon with Scarlett Johansson, it explains the rationale for faking the moon landing as a propaganda victory over the Russians. We faked the moon landing to trick the Russians. And if you can grasp that, then you can understand, okay, this makes sense. It's a propaganda victory, Cold War. We're winning the minds of the masses. We got to beat the commies. We got to beat the Russians. So you understand that as a rationale. We'll just expand it. America didn't fake the moon landing to trick the Russians. The moon landing was faked to trick humanity. And Russia and America are in collusion in this, as all governments are. It was a propaganda victory against you. It put us all into a singular world view. You could say that the New World Order religion was firmly established upon that particular miracle. And that's what the psyops are for. They create historic events, turning points in history, the significant transformative events that shake the globe and shape our perception of the world. And they do so by creating myths, performing miracles, and providing us with a cast of characters, villains, martyrs, and heroes. Plus a plethora of idols to worship and distract us. And the idols all exist in this fictional universe, and they all reinforce it. Anonymous says, I wonder if Jaren's going to flip-flop back to the flat earth side. It depends on where the money is. I'm convinced he's just going where the money is. And it's not dumb. I mean, he's a smart businessman. But he's incoherent. That's not a coherent transition for him to have made from looking at the fakery with the ISS and NASA in general, and then going to Antarctica, and now suddenly believing that Kate Perry went to space. Like, that's actually not coherent. And I don't know why he turned anti-flat earther. Because the term flat earther has always been a media-assigned pejorative, largely used to discredit people by associating them with an opinion they may not have. Just because you're a media critic or a critic of NASA doesn't mean that therefore you're this and you believe this. No, you might have questions. You might still be a skeptic, and a skeptic is allowed to suspend judgment. So if you don't believe NASA, it doesn't mean you therefore believe in what these flat earth Bible people are into. Maybe you're just like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's at the edge of the universe, do you? What's at the edge of the universe? We all have questions. And then some people have questions that don't assume previous answers are valid. So as long as we're asking questions, I think we're in the right. So I think the people who fell into that category of flat earth are actually just skeptics who've been assigned a label. And a lot of these people I still know or I still observe, they're still asking the same questions. It's not like they stopped. It's not like they just went to an alternative belief system. But what he has done, what Jeranism has done, is he has essentially turned his back on all these skeptics that he used to be on good terms with, and he's just chastising them over the premise that they're all just these dumb flat earthers. And it's like, I don't think that's what they are. Like, that's just one simple area in the worldview itself. Like, yeah, I mean, it's a valid question. If they lie about the news, they lie about history, they lie about everything, they consolidate resources, we're dealing with some kind of system that consolidates power and manipulates our minds en masse, we can trust them on the maps. I don't think so. I don't think that's valid. Like, I'm open to the possibility that maybe it's everything they say it is, but they've given us a false image to hide that other continent that we're not supposed to know about. When they start mining asteroids, it's probably coming from Atlantis. All right, we'll be back later on today. Open phones on multiple platforms. I have a few errands to run. I'm shipping some art. I want to say thanks to all of you who have purchased art from my store. The store was in the negative for months, and I'm back in the black. So it's profitable again. I can actually invest my time into it, and it'll cover a lot of expenses. I have $100 available for anybody who can spot a chemtrail in the wild, but you must also submit the metadata so I can cross-reference it with your local weather and the flight patterns, and we'll determine what's a better explanation, condensation trails or chemtrails. And if you caught a chemtrail, you'll get full credit for having blown the whistle and exposed something that people have been trying to expose for decades. You'll be a hero. We'll have a statue built in your name. You'll be like, there's that statue of Greta. Is that Greta? The statue, that girl who's putting her hand up at the bull? But we need a statue of like a chemtrail alarmist pointing at the sky. Anonymous says your $100 is safe. Well, I'm willing to risk it. And again, if they expose an anomaly and you see a trail where one shouldn't be, that's going to be a paradigm shock for me. But I'll run with it. All right, have a nice day. We'll see you all. There'll be a notification when we're live, so just check your inboxes.